Hello and welcome to the 2024 Brand X Reviews Christmas Special Part 2. I don't know how many parts we're going to chop this into, but there you go. So we left on the last video doing some mailbag questions from Paul Cage, and we're going to continue that here. Apologies, the first couple of questions are a bit silly, but it does get into things that are a little bit more to the point. So do stay with us, don't be put off by the first couple of questions and how random they are. We do get a little bit more to the point, talking about films and Christmas and so on. So enjoy.
That was the last question from Paul that we've just gone through on part 1. This is now part 2, of the Christmas special. So if you've not seen part 1, feel free to go back. Random questions that we're getting from Paul Cage. This first one, is the core a leg or a breast man? Meaning turkey meat, of course. It's a Christmas question. Do you want to plead the fifth on that?
Breast all the way, man. I don't even know why it's a question.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think it was just being a bit weird.
I don't know if he was angling for something more like ooh, but leg meat is shit. I don't like.
To anyone who's just turned this video on, that is an odd question. The rest of the questions aren't going to be like that, so apologies.
Why did you start with that one?
We're just running out of time on the other one, so there we go. I can edit it out, and I'll keep it in. So, if you had an unlimited budget, what Christmas movie would you make? Go nuts with this one, eh? I don't get that. Does he mean like remake? Do you understand that question? We can skip it if you don't understand it.
I mean, I'm taking it more as like, if I could make an unlimited budget Christmas movie, what would it be? Like, again, I'm not the guy to ask. Like, I'm not the Christmas movie guy. Like, I mean, I like Scrooged, and I don't have anything strong against like a lot of the other Christmas movies that you brought up. But again, I'm the sort of guy who's like, no, fuck it, I'll just watch Lethal Weapon or something, you know. Even though it's not particularly Christmassy, I'm not a Christmas movie guy, so
yeah. For me, I mean, like I said, I'm not a filmmaker, but I mean, I'd probably do something like what the Daily Wire's doing with films like Lady Ballers. So I'd probably do like a Christmas movie that kind of pushes back against the woke thing, which you could say equally is you're kind of playing into the game of inserting the message, albeit a counter message to the message. But you know, it can work. Lady Ballers was like pretty good for what it was. And that was a lower budget film. So I'd probably do something.
I wouldn't even say it needs to be a big message that deliberately pushes back. Just having like a fun film without like a boring lady boss character, without having like. So I say I have nothing against like a trans or like lesbian or gay character.
Yeah,
if it's a good character. The problem is, like 99% of the time, it's like, okay, well, yep, they are this list of like things.
Yeah, it's ticking boxes.
Like, no, I've just ticked these boxes. Like, look, the trans and the disabled, and they're an ethnic minority. Like, that's a great character, right? It's like, well, no, that's just a load of like things that you've given them. That's not a personality. That's like,
yeah.
That should be where you start, not where you finish. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. So we'll kind of skip on that question. I don't know, I probably answered it anyway. But question 7: your dream direction for the future of James Bond. It means James Bond. He's done that on purpose. So your dream direction for the future of James Bond. Talk about dream actors, stories, etc. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you see, that is one I'm not 100% sure how to answer that one, because one of my favorite things about the whole like Casino Royale kind of era, that sort of stuff, I didn't really see them going that way, and I wasn't really expecting it. And for them to go back to this sort of almost like soft reboot, kind of maybe like we're going for a very different Bond and a very different feel. Like, I would kind of like to see something like that done again. I don't really know how you would do it. Like, please, dear God, not Jane Bond, for fuck's sakes.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Like, I think that's about the only way they would go nowadays. But yeah, like something like that where it's like very different from what we've had before, because we had kind of like the Sean Connery Bond, who could be a bit of a bastard. He was like a very cool and stuff, and then that kind of went into like, you know, very different, taking a bit more of the tongue-in-cheek kind of Roger Moore type Bond. And like I say, I would really like to see them do something a bit different. But like I say, I'm not smart enough to like say, all right, this is the way this should go. Like, I don't know where I'd like to see them take it. Just it would be nice to see it go in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, because it'd be satisfying to see the sort of going back to Bond being like a bit more of a stone cold killer and having him smoke and do all these other kind of things and sleeping around more, using women as kind of like throwaway pleasures, which just in that world, that's just what women are, you know, to him. Those are the kind of women that would gravitate towards him. It just is what it is. You can do that, but it gets a bit cringy because the Lee Tamahori that did Die Another Day tried to put that into that movie, and it just kind of didn't work. It was really cringy. I mean, it might have just been because it was Pierce Brosnan that was doing it, and it just didn't seem right. As much as I like appreciate what I was trying to do, I don't know, the execution just felt a bit cringy and just, I don't know. So I wouldn't.
I don't really think you can quite go back to like. Because honestly, the one that comes to mind when you say that is like the original, like Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Kind of. You could also argue like that's also like the is it Timothy Dalton? You know, where he's a bit more, you know, of a like dark kind of character.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like say like Bond's been very much their own thing, and it's like I don't really know what I want next.
Yeah. So really, I think what I'd like to see would be like proper adaptations of the book, setting them in the era that they were set in. But the problem with that is you're going to be comparing them with the movies that they actually made. So like if you did Goldfinger or whatever, and it was, you did them in a linear sense, like each movie comes out, so like Casino Royale is like the first film that comes out, and then after that you've got Live and Let Die, and then after that there's was it Moonraker, and then Diamonds Are Forever. Though that's the order of the books, just off the top of my head anyway.
That'd be a really hard sell. Would be like, yep, we're remaking Casino Royale. I don't think people would kind of get it.
Yeah,
like we've only just had that film. Like that's still pretty recent. Like all things considered, in the Bond kind of franchise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
I do like that concept of like, you know, almost like a period piece. Like, you know, this is, you know, almost maybe if they did like an original Bond story, but in the style of the original novels. If you get me, like a bit of both was like it's a new story, but it's written in that style and it's set in that time period in that world. Like this is Bond of the '60s, you know. This is the world he inhabits. Like this is the like politics of that, you know. Because there is to be said for those like, you know, Life on Mars and like all these other kind of shows that like Stranger Things, and they kind of set themselves like very specific. They're like, yeah, in some ways, almost the decade and the time period the setting is as much of a character as the actual characters.
Yeah, I think it'd be kind of difficult as well because we know how the estate of Ian Fleming has been treated in the way that they allow these books to be kind of like have slight changes in them. It wasn't the end of the world, but it just shows how well where the heart is really in terms of like following the ESG and the DEI agenda and so on, and like inserting that in there. Even when it just comes to just a republication of the book for the 60th anniversary. We've seen what they've done with the Charlie Higson books, where it just basically says that like Brexit voters are akin to Nazis, something along that line. Anyway, the movies we got off. I've said this before. We got off so lucky with that last film that they didn't go like full bore with like the wokeness. You can see where they'd attempted to sort of start it off and then maybe changed course. I don't know if it was in like editing or in the reshoots or whatever, to the point where like, no, James Bond is like the main guy. We don't need to have him like upstaged by some like diversity higher character in here. And in the end, they got a pretty good character in the woman that becomes 007. She was actually pretty good in it, and she had some like good moments because she wasn't trying to upstage James Bond. It's not because like we have a problem with women doing it or like black people doing it. It's like, no, this is about James Bond. Like, we didn't like it when Jeremy Renner took over from Matt Damon in the Bourne films because we wanted Jason Bourne, not because we don't like Jeremy Renner. I really like Jeremy Renner, but he
I was
wasn't.
gonna say, like, I'd say the
Yeah.
exact opposite. We're big fans.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a case of like, oh, I don't want a black woman like upstaging him. It's like, no, James, but it's about him. You take James Bond out of the equation, it's just a film set in any pretty much the real world, depending which iteration of Bond we're talking about. But like the world of spies and shadow governments and so on, and criminal organizations and terrorism and stuff. That's
Like I
kind of
say,
our
it's
world.
it's the whole kind of mindset of like, well, we'll take something that's established and already popular and make it more popular. It's like I
Yeah,
can't remember who first said this, but it's basically like the more you make something inclusive, the more you exclude people, whether you mean to or not.
yeah, you push people out.
And you
So
get that
yeah,
a lot in video games. It's like, yeah, you'll have like a really good strategy game that's like balls fucking hard and like really difficult, but it's really popular amongst like strategy fans. But then they'll
yeah,
like slowly, like each game, they'll dumb it down more, they'll make it a bit easier, they'll take these systems out and stuff. And then like 2, 3 games in, it's like, well, this isn't the same fucking game. And you
yeah,
haven't really brought in the Tour of Duty crowd because they're still like the, shooty bang bang. They're not going to play a strategy game. Like, they're not interested. And if they were interested, they were already playing it. Like, it's the kind of modern audience thing. It's like we try to bring in these guys that don't particularly give a shit about films. But here's the thing: they don't give a shit about films, no matter how much you pander to them. And you've
yeah,
pissed off the fans you had because they're not interested in all this bullshit you've shoehorned in.
yeah. So yeah, he asked about dream actors. I don't really have one, but I mean,
I say
what's his
again,
name?
I would never have like told you like, oh yeah, like I want was it Daniel Craig to be like I wouldn't even known who that was particularly. Like I would think I was vaguely aware of him. Like again, I kind of want to be surprised,
Yeah, go with like a much lesser known. I mean, there's Aaron Taylor Johnson. He'd be all right. He'd be pretty good. Might be a bit old because like they need to plan like 10, 15 years ahead and to keep him in the franchise potentially as well. So I don't know. I mean, maybe he ain't too old, but yeah, I don't know. Like I say, go with an unknown, really. So yeah, we'll move on because yeah. So the next one is probably this one. We're going to be talking for ages on this one, so we might not even have time for it. But question 8: if the core was to get his cracker pulled, who would be his dream puller and why?
Dover.
That's the only answer for that, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know, a big black woman who's going to scare the shit out of me, like just to police FB. I don't
Yeah.
know. Again, like the fuck, dude.
Yeah, that was a quote, by the way, to anyone watching this. Core wasn't being racist. That was something that somebody else said about the core. So bit of an enjoy.
With like a big black girl, and it's like, oh, that's very specific. Okay,
Yeah,
like I
some
don't
pretty
know
out
what I've done
ones.
for like. It's
Yeah, I
not
mean,
even like I'm like, oh, like no, I could never like be with her. It's like I don't know where the fuck that's come from. There's no context to it whatsoever.
yeah, that's like saying getting with a woman in a green dress. It's like, well, that you could have some pretty fit girls in a green dress. So yeah, fair enough. You can have some pretty big.
It's like it's
Pretty
not like
big.
I've ever been like, oh, I hate black women or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
like, okay, that's I actually see me more like your kink at this point. What the hell?
yeah. It was just anyway. So I hope you like the answer to that one, Paul. If you're watching this, which I'm sure you will be, the only person watching this at this point. Question 9, the last question. So, and this is a proper question now. So, given that remakes can be frowned upon, in your opinion, the best remake that surpasses the original, in your opinion, of course. Well, yeah, everything's in our opinion. We don't need to add that. But yeah, so best remake, basically. Thoughts?
I mean, definitely the crazies because I was not a big fan of like the original of that.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like I said, there are a lot of films that I honestly think there was a kernel of a good idea there, and they could really do with like a remake, but they were kind of shit and didn't do very well, so they're never going to get one.
yeah, yeah. remakes, there's been some good ones. I mean, nothing against Assault on Precinct 13. I like the original. I really like it. It's a classic. But I think I was really pleasantly surprised with the remake of that, and I thought that was in many ways a superior film. Just from obviously a bigger budget and so on, and like really good actors like Ethan Hawke. Because it was kind of off the back of like Training Day, which was a good film, and I think it was the same writer or producer or something. Was it David Ayer? I think had something to do with it. I might be wrong. But yeah, that would be one. I always remember that as being one where I thought that's actually surpassed the original, and I really like the original. There's probably some really obvious ones that I'm not thinking of here. There's some.
For Dead 2.
What's that?
Evil Dead
2. Yeah, yes, good example, very good example.
It's kind of like a sequel, but it's really not. It's like a remake. Like, there's no way the events of the first film happened and the events of the second film happened as like depicted.
Yeah. It was because he had issues with the original release of it being banned and that, and in the UK as well. I don't know why the UK was so important, but for the distribution of it. But
probably
yeah.
The idea and the visuals of it that it's a video nasty, like it was more like that. If you get me?
Yeah.
Rather than specifically like, oh man, we were really counting on the UK. But like being dubbed like a video nasty, I don't think was like a good look they wanted to go for.
Yeah. Yes, I mean there are some films where it being a remake isn't as obvious, because like Alien, in some ways, people have said that's a remake of it came from outer space or something that was another sort of alien slasher movie in space. People said that's a remake. You could throw in
one of those things where it was based on like, they were based on the same thing, kind of like the Thing is kind of based on like the same thing.
Good example. Yeah, very good example. There's also Invasion of the Body Snatchers as well. The original one's very good, but the 1970s one is like the superior. I would say The Thing. The Thing is one of my favorite films anyway, so I'd probably say that's probably my favorite remake. And I like the original, the 1952 version.
I noticed though, ironically, we're just all horrors.
Yeah.
I don't think there's been anything in this thing that we've discussed that hasn't been a horror.
Yeah. For the Halloween special, we covered The Fly as well. And the Topher covered The Fly once as well in the bath, but he didn't have any wings.
Whenever a bell sounds, an angel gains the wing. Whenever Topher catches a fly, it loses its wings.
No, when Topher flaps his bell end, a fly loses its wings. Anyway, yeah. So, but a really obvious one as well. Scarface. The original was in the 30s, I think it was, and good film. It's a classic. It's even given its age. You look at it, even the sound in that film. That is a good film. But the Al Pacino remake from 82, was it 82 or 83? It was really good. Like that's another like just masterclass film. Like everything about it, like the way it's filmed and the acting and the music and so on, and the story is just like a really good film.
I kind of argue in a way that Star Wars is kind of a remake on like the original like Japanese film we kind of based it on, like.
Yeah.
But I think that is like I think that is like not a real. I don't think we could class that.
Yeah,
we're reaching.
We're reaching now, so yeah. Well, yeah. So in terms of, I would go with The Thing just because it's one of my favourite films. But there's plenty of other honourable mentions there, I think.
Dread.
Yeah, it's true. It's another it's a readaptation, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah.
Dune. I'm basically going down a list of like remakes.
Oh yeah.
The original Dune has its cult appeal, but it is kind of like a weird watch. Whereas like the newer, I've not seen the second part of Dune 2, but like the original part is like a lot better.
Yeah, there's some good ones. The Mechanic, the Statham film. I like the original. I like all like Charles Bronson films. Like, is probably the biggest collection that I've got. The Mechanic was the original one. Michael Winner directed that. But the remake of that was really good, I thought. Not like up there with Scarface. Yeah, so there's plenty we could kind of talk about, but that's all ones for Paul's mailbag anyway. So what we'll do is I'll just bring this back into part 2. So I'll just into part 3. Let me just we're just going to end this. We're going to come back for part 3 because the videos get a bit long.
So check part 3, which is available now. We do get into some of the more serious culture war and woke stuff. In fact, if you want to know what the general vibe is, keep watching.
I told the globalists a long time ago, I meant it. You want to fight, you better believe you've got one. And there are people all over this country engaging in the information war, and we're going to smash your system. We're going to return the republic. We'll never be perfect, but my God, we're not going to keep babies alive and harvest their organs. We're not going to sell their parts for women's cosmetics. We're not going to have Pepsi with baby flavoring in it. I mean, what the hell have we become? Excuse me, but I'm tired of it.